Welcome to another podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nisha Chellam. This is Yes Women Wired for Wellness. So today we're going to have a discussion about a very interesting topic. This is a topic around women's health. Here's why this is going to be interesting. I'm going to be talking to Dr. Marilyn Glenville, who's not a medical doctor but is a Ph.D., a registered nutritionist, a psychologist, and an author of 13 books. She's an international speaker. She's a broadcaster. She shows up on TV, radio. She is amazing. I remember having come across one of her webinars, completely, totally mesmerized by the information she gave on a very difficult topic. That when I say difficult topic for most women, which is osteoporosis. What I found interesting about her career path and what she does is she focuses on the natural healing, the nutritional healing of many of the annoying chronic problems that women face. Right from menstrual irregularities, menstrual pain, PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis, infertility, and then later on in life, the menopause and osteoporosis. She actually can work with an individual and with couples to help women understand and naturally manage these diseases. Who doesn't want that? No one wants to be popping a whole bunch of pills which have side effects. So that's why I'm so excited, because the nutritional aspect of women's health is, I don't think, discussed enough, because I still find patients coming and talking to me and saying, I have endometriosis but it runs in my family, or I have fibroids, it runs in my family. So this can have some far-reaching effects and completely alter the trajectory of your life. So it's important to understand, if you can resolve this naturally, why not? And if there's an expert who has dedicated her whole life to understanding these processes and helping people, she's on my podcast. So without any further delay, here's my conversation with Dr. Marilyn Glenville. Welcome, Dr. Glenville. I am really excited to talk to you. I see you got your PhD Cambridge.
Yes, yeah.
And it's like one of the oldest universities, right? And
it is, yeah.
Which is the oldest one? I thought this was the second oldest.
Yeah, I think probably Oxford is
Oxford?
old. Yeah,
Oxford.
The two are hand in hand in terms of our top universities, yeah.
Nice, yeah. So you graduated from Cambridge. You did a lot of things as they call you a registered nutritionist. Is that?
Yeah.
Is that the same as a registered dietitian here?
No, it's different. No. Yes, it's a different pathway. So nutrition and dietitian would be different pathways. So yeah. So let's get into your own journey to what you do, because you do a lot of work, particularly with helping women heal naturally, and we'll get into what that means. And a lot of it is with food, which is what most people are seeking, but somehow it doesn't land. It's not something that, because if everybody listened to people like you and me, there would be no illness. Yes.
Right? But obviously there's something we're not able to break through in that. So tell me your journey, and then we'll delve a little deeper into all the work that you do.
Well, I did the PhD in Cambridge, and it was a mix of both psychology and physiology. It was on biological sciences, and I got very interested in premenstrual syndrome. That was my first sort of foray into women's health, and realized that actually women would be given antidepressants. That was the drug of choice to deal with something that was coming in a cycle, that maybe they only had 7 to 10 days a month, and yet were on antidepressants all the time. And that made me think about the biology that was going on, and then this understanding of we could change the underlying physiology by changing their pattern of eating. And that really was a light bulb moment, particularly also for me, because I'd suffered also with migraines for many years, and never connected that what I was eating could actually be causing those headaches. So it was that personal side of it, as well as the woman side. And then from that premenstrual syndrome introduction, it's gone into the whole area of women's health now. And that's what I've been working on for the last 30 years with a clinic in Harley Street and also outside of London as well. But it's been a joy to be able to help women through whatever stage they are in their life.
So let me ask you this. If somebody is listening to us for the first time and not understanding what premenstrual syndrome is, which I phantom no one does because everybody complains about, oh, she must be PMSing. So that's usually the statement. So what is a premenstrual syndrome? What would you define it as?
Well, it used to be called premenstrual tension because it was more about that tension and anxiety. And then it was understood that there could be 150 different symptoms that women could experience in this 7 to 10 days before the period. And so it could be water retention. So there may be breast tenderness, there may be bloating. Yes, there may be mood changes as well, but also food cravings. So they expanded it out into premenstrual syndrome that included a cluster of different symptoms. And what's been interesting is that because medically doctors will always go by symptoms, it can't be looked at like that. It has to be looked at its timing because the symptoms are so varied with up to 150 and they can vary from month to month. So it's actually, this is one of those situations where it's done on the timing of the symptom and not necessarily the symptoms themselves.
Yeah, so there's a physical component, there's an emotional component to it, and a lot of it is the discomfort a woman experiences. So let me ask you this, is it not normal? Is that an abnormal condition?
I think where it's not normal is where the women explaining to me that they feel like Jekyll and Hyde. They do feel a completely different personality shift. It affects their relationships, not only with their partner, but all their children. So it can be very extreme. There is even an extreme version, which is a premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is actually in the psychiatric manual. So it can be classed as a psychiatric disease when it gets so extreme. And of course, yes, we are in a cycle as we go through that period and the menstrual part, but this is something where the women feel it's affecting their quality of life physically and emotionally.
People come to you with this. This has been my experience. When they come to me with this particular complaint, they talk to me about how it runs in their family. Everybody in their family experiences this, right? So how do you actually help them understand what runs in the family probably are the habits? And this might be something, there's some truth to it running in the family. Like you said, there may be some genetic SNPs that actually put you at a high risk for migraine headaches. But in general, how do you initiate this conversation with a woman so that she understands that premenstrual symptom is something that she can actually control?
Yes, and you're right, because it could run in the family in times that there may be a genetic component, but also it's patterns of eating, it's things that have been passed down, how the family eat together, habits that they may have taken on board. So it is about giving the woman the understanding that this is something she can take control of, that she's not powerless, that something can be done about this. And actually, she could change her quality of life by making certain changes. And I think that's when the trust comes in, that she is able to make that step and say, okay, yes, I think this could happen. And I'm willing to take those steps and take that advice on board. And that's a really big step, I think, for some women to take, that they can make these changes and it can change their life if they're able to do it.
Yeah. So a lot of times when they do come to you in terms of whether it would be premenstrual symptoms, what would you say is the success rate in them following through with all of these changes?
I have to say with PMS, it's the most successful one I treat. I have to say, out of everything, because it's so amenable to dietary change and it's very quick as well. So it's one of those that it's a delight to be able to say to the woman, yes, this will work very effectively. This is what you need to do. And for her to take that on board, and then for her to come back and say, actually, this has transformed my life and thank you. And that's really powerful because it is very quick to change. So that's been a delight over the years to be able to make that difference in those women's lives.
What I see is patients either move towards pleasure or move away from pain. So I think PMS is one of those things. The pain is so significant. They're willing to make those changes. Because the greater distress that I see as a physician is I can see them, this is when I was practicing traditional medicine, I can see them declining, and they literally, everything else is on their plate, right? Their work, their kids, their parents, and they don't have them on the list. So they live all their life carrying these almost annoyance, right? Heavy menstrual cycle, having to take Motrin or because the periods are coming, having the pain in their breasts, feeling like they're swelling tight, having some insomnia, having little anxiety, depression, but they continue to function doing all of their work. And then eventually, as I see them, because I've seen them as both in my outpatient clinic and the hospital and in the nursing homes, I see that the last few decades, they're just walking around waiting for death to happen. It's just a very tragic lifespan. It's almost like a journey to death. Why is that? What are we missing when it comes to healthcare for women?
I think oftentimes they're putting themselves quite a way down the list. And like you said, they're looking after children, they may be looking after elderly parents, they've got partners, and for them they're putting up with these symptoms and can push themselves through daily life because most of it is not a definite illness in the sense, but it's this shopping list of symptoms that grow over time, and they're putting up with it. And the amazing thing is, it's not until the women have made those changes that they've actually realised what they were suffering through when those symptoms was there. And it wasn't until they'd gone, and then it was, my goodness, it was like this light bulb moment of what actually they were carrying and putting up with on a day-to-day basis because they could live through it. And and how do you explain to somebody what this difference will be? It's not until they experience that change do they see what they were living through and putting up with for year after year.
You know, that is probably the most astute observation, because they have a lot of annoyances that are not necessarily illnesses, right? Because their blood test comes back normal. Yeah. And I feel a lot of it is they go to their doctors hoping like, oh my God, they're going to find my thyroid is all whacked out. My hormones are all whacked out. And the doctor says, everything looks good. Yeah. And, you know, and you come back and it's like, it's just me. It's just me. And because it's me, it's difficult to change. I just don't have the time to change. Yeah. So what would you say? I mean, like for you, what do you see as other than the fact that they take care of everybody else, what do you think is the greatest barrier when you've spoken to so many women and you've written like 13 books. So I know you have seen a pattern. What do you think is the bigger barrier? So somebody listening to this can say, you know what, I do have that barrier and I need to overcome that.
Yes, and I think it's having the trust that it's going to be worth the effort to make those changes, because obviously medically, if somebody has high cholesterol, you could prescribe them a statin and they could carry on eating the chocolate cakes and everything else that they wanted to. But we're asking women to fundamentally take responsibility for their health. I'm sharing the advice, I'm sharing the experience, and I know what the potential is by them making those steps. But it's them actually saying, okay, I understand that, I can do that. But it is them making that effort, and I understand it is an effort at the beginning because they're just trying to keep themselves together on a daily basis and function and look after everybody else. And it requires adding something else to their life at that moment to think they're going to make some changes. And it's that step of how they do that. And sometimes I think some women will need smaller step, a smaller, shorter term goal, rather than saying, well, this is everything that you do and it will be wonderful. And some will take that on board, and others are going to need smaller changes to be able to feel confident that it's making a difference and that they can cope with that change. And yes, I'm feeling better. I can cope with the next change. And it's how you put those layers on, depending on somebody's personality and their life pressures and everything else that they're juggling in everyday life.
That is actually a point that I have noticed too. So in fact, recently I put a poll on my little community. I said, people are chronically ill because, number one, they do not know there is another way, or they do not want to change, or they do not have a diagnosis. I gave them 3 choices. And really, the most votes were for they do not want to change. So that was surprising to me. Some of them did. I mean, the next neck to neck with they do not know that there is another option. Yes. But if they're in my group, they do know that there's another option. But a good number of them did say they do not want to change. So, and this reminds me also of a phone call I received from a lady who had gone on a cruise ship. And she's been struggling with Hashimoto's. She had been struggling for quite some time. And then coming off the cruise ship, she slipped, fell, and fractured her legs. So obviously, I'm going to assume if you just fell off the steps, you probably have some osteoporosis. And she called me saying, I'm really so tired of being so tired. And I explained to her, yes, I understand, like what you said, there are other things that you can do to get better. It's a little bit of a process. We peel it like layer by layer. She thought about it and she said, you know what? I want to hang around with my friends. I want to drink and I want to eat. I really don't think I can do much to change. So in many ways, I blame myself for it, because the way I explained to her all these amazing things she's going to get to do to feel amazing at the end of it. This was very early in my practice as a functional medical physician. I thought I was giving her all the things that I would be excited to work with her, and I think she got overwhelmed. They seem to be choosing belonging to a community rather than change and feel alienated. Do you see that as a big barrier?
Yes, I do. And it's only when I think that they feel that they can't continue with the symptoms that they're feeling. Like you said, that pain, that if that pain of what they're experiencing, and if it restricts their life, then they may be willing to make that change, but they will be operating differently from a lot of their friends. And that's how do they cope with that. But I think it gets to the point where they've had enough. They're fed up with feeling like that, tired of feeling tired. And then what do I do about it? Because I'm ready. They've got to be ready to take that step. That's got to be, it's like somebody comes in, you say, and the smoking situation, somebody has to be ready to stop smoking. Nobody can bring them in and say, well, my friend needs to stop smoking. It's not going to work. It has to be that that's the right moment for them. And then everything fits into place.
That's so true, because it's just, it has to come from within you. So let me ask you this, a couple of things as I want to go to the next. I'm going to take the lifespan of a woman, so because you're a wealth of knowledge there. But just to talk about the very first thing that you did mention, the PMS. What are some of the changes that you know for sure will work no matter what? Maybe they're unwilling to change. What is the one thing that they can do that can help their PMS?
And I have to say, this also goes across most of the ages with most of the hormonal conditions, and that is sorting out blood glucose and blood sugar, whichever we want to call it. That, for me, is the crux of what, for most women, is going on. And if they're going to take one step, and that's when I say sometimes, just do this one thing, because it could be overwhelming to do all the things I'm suggesting. That can make such a difference in such a short space of time. And it is the key to what's going on with PMS. And it really does make a difference to get that blood sugar under control, because many of them are living on a roller coaster of ups and downs of mood, of ups and downs of blood sugar, of ups and downs of energy. It's how their whole day is operating, and that has such an impact on the female hormone system. So that would always be my first step for them to do, and say, do this one thing if you can't do anything else, and then see how it goes.
Oh my God, I just love this, because I always tell people, if you gave me just one hormone to address in a woman, that would be insulin.
Yes.
And it's because the up and down of the insulin, it really drives our whole system bonkers, especially with the progesterone, insulin, your thyroid. I mean, it's like the cortisol. Everything gets disrupted with just this fluctuations of blood sugar.
And then you see polycystic ovary syndrome and insulin. It's the whole gamut of everything that we go through as women. And that one step, if they can say, okay, I can do that, tremendous. Yeah.
So do you use a continuous glucose monitor?
No, I don't. I would get them to follow all the dietary recommendations, and then usually their doctor is taking care of them on that respect if they need it. But we're normally doing it just with the dietary side, and it does work very well.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. So let's start with the lifespan of a woman. I'm noticing younger and younger women having more physical problems, right? I'm getting young, like 18 to 24, 25, calling me and talking to me about their skin condition, about their gut, about their irregular menstrual cycle, and they all get put on oral contraceptive pills, right? Because there's so much of pain during periods. It's almost like they're anemic. And in fact, I have a gal who was, I think she was in her late teens when they did a hysterectomy. To me, it was just, I was just aghast. That's how bad her endometriosis was, and she needed to get that removed. So I find this whole spectrum, whether it be painful menstruation, frequency or irregularity, fibroids, endometriosis, all of them are in the same spectrum. Like you said, it's the fluctuations of the blood sugars. But tell me a little more about in young women, why are we seeing such increasing rates of menstrual abnormalities? Almost it's granted everybody who gets attains menarche is going to have some kind of an irregularity, is going to get put on oral contraceptive pills. What do you believe is driving that change, and how do you approach it?
I think it is a combination. It's a combination of lifestyle and, like you said, the stress that these young women may be under, because they're also on a career path at this time and really, want to achieve things. And I can understand that, and that's wonderful. But it is a lot of pressure they're putting themselves under, and longer days as well, and also how whole issue around food and how processed it's become. We've lost that, they haven't got time for home cooking. So it is a really accumulation, I think, of lifestyle factors, lack of exercise, everything that's going on that really is impinging on them at such an early age. Plus, we've got the endocrine disrupting chemicals in the environment, in our toiletries, pesticides. It is something different from a couple of generations ago that wasn't there in that exposure for those women at that age.
So tell me a little more about the endocrine disruptors. And I remember looking on your website about tampons, which I think every young woman uses. I mean, I came from India, and I would just look at that little thing in the the bathrooms where they have, like, put a coin and get a tampon, and like, why would you do that? But it was very interesting. And then we do this toxic insight. Toxic shock syndrome. So I'm thinking, why are they doing that? And what would be your advice to women who just start their periods? Because I think the young girls just go for tampons. I don't think they even know what a pad looks like.
Well, I would say go for a pad where possible in our everyday life, and go for cotton. It's the consideration whether there could be chemicals either in the pad or in the tampon, and things like dioxins, which are in the paper producing industry, and they can have a carcinogenic effect. So I would always go for cotton. But of course, women are going to go on holiday, they're swimming, they may be in a swimming club, and that's when the tampons are really useful. But still, to go for organic cotton and go for that best quality. I do think a tampon, of course, is useful lifestyle wise, but it is acting as a dam and stopping that blood flow, which is supposed to be flowing at that time of the month. And of course, if it's left in there and the woman has forgotten about it, then there is, as you mentioned, that toxic shock syndrome, which can actually be fatal. But I think it's about us choosing whatever products we're using, whether it's sanitary products, whether it's cosmetics, moisturizers, is to think about what we're putting on our skin and in our body as much as we should be doing with our food, and going for things as close to nature as possible, because even in our skin, it's very porous. That's how nicotine patches, HRT patches work. So we have to think about what we're rubbing on our skin, around our breasts, our reproductive organs, is going to be just as important as what we're choosing to eat, I think.
Yeah, that's so true, because I think everybody must have seen that little meme where a woman is walking out and they say 156 chemicals she walks out of the house with, right? Looking absolutely stunning, but that's what it takes to look stunning. Right from head to toe. And that's what is disrupting our hormones. In fact, I think there's a study that showed in the Canadian, one of the lakes, when they get the fish, the thyroid is completely ruptured. And they think it's the chemicals from the industry that disrupts the thyroid physically. And these are the fish we're eating. And the potential for us to have problems too is there. It's taking forever for the Endocrine Society to admit, but they did finally. They said, yes, these chemicals are acting as endocrine disruptors.
Because we've also got in our rivers in the UK, we've got and the environmental agency has told us we've got a third of our river of our fish, the male fish, becoming feminized, because these chemicals from not only the pesticide but also the plastic industry are going into the water supply. So that's the concern, is that yes, they're going to have an effect on us as women, and conditions which are driven by estrogen, like fibroids, endometriosis, certain breast cancers, but also having an effect on men and their fertility and sperm counts and everything over time. So it's going to affect men and women across the board, just in different ways.
So can you actually handle, just changing the diet and exercise when you have all these chemicals on board? Is that something that you see feasible?
I do see it as feasible, and I do understand that we are always going to be up against things that we can't control. And there's things in that environment. We can make better choices in what we're using on our body in terms of cosmetics, toiletries, plastic bottles with bisphenol A, that sort of thing. Yes, there will be things out of our control, and there is understanding we may have to accept that, but it's about what we do personally. And even though we are limited to complete control over it, it's still going to make a difference to our health, and that's the really important thing.
So really, I can't use an excuse if I can't lose weight that it's all the chemicals I'm exposed to. It's just not a excuse that you will take.
Or I've got big bones.
Yeah, of course. Well, everybody in my family is big, so. But as much as we make fun of it, I think patients realize that too a lot. That they are saying all these things, but they don't believe in it themselves. They tell me that later. I remember I used to think this way, and you changed all that for me. So I'm so glad that we can actually. I find that people are getting more and more well informed and educated, and realize that they can make a difference. And so many of these things, you're not helpless. Yes, you may not change everything. Like one of my other colleagues said, it's like walking through the world like a big barrel, a dumpster that is accumulating all of the stuff, and it's for us to sort that out. The body just has to sort that out, and we have to help the body to sort it out efficiently so that it can continue to function. So I know there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline. I'm very excited about peptides, which I'm going to be talking to my group of patients, because I think that will be a game changer for many folks. But let's talk about, so young women, they have to learn to handle their stress. They have to learn to move away from processed foods, be aware of all the chemicals that they put on themselves and put inside them, like the tampons. But let's say they are making all those changes. How much does alcohol play a role in all of this?
Yes, a big role, and I think that's a change from generations ago where young girls wouldn't have been drinking the amount they're drinking. And I have seen some women in the clinic, but actually it's the whole weekend they're drinking and they're taking the whole of Monday to recover. And it's a huge amount of alcohol. So I think the binge drinking as well that's changed over time. So it's something that is, and it's going to affect women, for the rest of their life as well, but it's that impact on the liver, and it's trying to explain to them that they can't handle it as well as men. Their metabolism, alcohol is going to be different, and it impacts their hormones, and it's just to try to moderate it. And some of them, it's very much the social side, it's after work, they're all going to bars, so it's how do you change that but fit it into your lifestyle so that you still feel socially included, like you said, that you're not alienated from your group, that you can still participate in everything, but you're still trying to nourish yourself and take care of your health at the same time.
But the same women, once they get pregnant, they're able to quit their alcohol. Somehow it just becomes socially acceptable to drink when you're pregnant. But it's okay. But I think the quality of the egg gets affected prior to you getting pregnant. And
yeah.
It's
it
very
does.
important.
And women, if they're waiting later, which they are generally now in our generation to get pregnant, maybe they've not met the right person, they're on that career ladder, which is lovely, but their biological clock is still the same as it was a generation ago. And of course, we're aiming to try and help them stay fertile for as long as possible. But the alcohol is going to knock that down. So would smoking. So that's the problem. It doesn't give them as many years possible in order to get pregnant, but they're waiting longer. So you've got a combination of factors that can make it harder to get pregnant for that woman when she wants to.
I know we probably are going to be talking about it like a broken record, but I want to talk about the next phase. So here's a young woman she's figured out, like, her PMS, she can handle it. The periods she's trying to figure out. Then comes the fertility issue, right? And many of them I find struggle. And that's the first time they get offered hormones as a solution to their menstrual problems. And then again, they're offered a different set of hormones as a solution to their infertility. What do you see as the most common reason that they are infertile? Because I've seen actually women come to me who are very thin, who are very active, do yoga, eat healthy. They call it, I eat clean. Yes. And yet have infertility issues or difficulty getting pregnant. What have you seen as the bigger challenge that that seems to be plaguing them?
And it's interesting because they now talk about disordered eating, that those women don't actually have an eating disorder, but they've taken that clean eating to the extreme. And it is that weight loss and that physical activity where it is too extreme, and they've lost a huge percentage of body weight. They haven't got a cycle. Even if they were not even a gymnast or an athlete, some women are going to that extreme. And of course, then they haven't got a cycle at all. They're put on the contraceptive pill. And like you said, they're going from that contraceptive pill to hormones to try and induce ovulation. And it's how do we help them to say that actually we need to do something now to protect your fertility for the future. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult, or you'll end up down the IVF route, which many women are going that route nowadays.
So one extreme is where you're not taking care of your health, and the other extreme is where taking too much care of your health. So it's like, oh my God, you got to find a happy medium, which is actually very difficult given all the information. So how do you advise women to sort through all of this information? Because I find most people are looking for a simple solution. And when I mean a simple solution, so they they start exercising, right? Everybody gives us a tip. I'm so disgusted. I saw my pictures in the group, and I don't want to look like that anymore. They have this plan. They go into the gym. They start exercising. They've changed their diet. They've removed all carbs, which can be a whole separate podcast on its own. But they're eating all this meat and vegetables and drinking water, doing everything. And then they step on the scale and nothing really happens, right? And this is where they get disappointed, and they kind of, all of their old habits come back. It's just, I just can't lose weight. So what is the advice that you give to women who do this start, stop cycle and keep looking for information but are never successful?
Yes, and obviously there's been a lot of research, especially on things like the yo-yo dieting, which actually then affects their thyroid, their whole metabolism. It actually is putting them back in time by going from one fad diet onto another. And for me, it's about thinking to try and explain to them that what we are after is a way of eating that becomes a way of life, that it's not something that you're going to do now as a diet and then you're going to stop and it's going to be something different, that we're aiming to have a way of eating that we eat like this for the rest of our life, except there will be changes if you're going on holiday or a birthday party or something like that, and your body will cope with it. But ultimately, it's thinking of this as not a diet, but this way of eating that transforms our health, and we can continue like this into the future. And I always have this 80-20 rule, that 80% of the time I'd like them to eat healthy. There will be the 20% blips, and their body will absolutely cope with it. And that's the social side and everything else. But it is thinking about this in a different way, rather than a fad diet and then another fad diet or a different exercise regime. It's how do we get this moderation in there, this homeostasis, for the body to actually rectify itself and change that underlying physiology, which is what I'm really after, to give them a long-term solution.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point. People will say things like take smoking as an example, because it's an easy one, it's well studied, everybody understands it. When somebody's smoking a cigarette, they don't get lung cancer. But when they smoke cigarettes over 35 years, the potential for lung cancer is very high, and they're not surprised at that time. It's not like, but somehow when we make these changes to our lifestyle, we're suddenly eating a couple of salads, you're going to exercise, you're not seeing the needle move on your weighing machine, you kind of give up. It's like, I always tell this to patients, where you've taken 10, 15, or 20 years to earn this condition. You most likely need to take a year or two to unearn it and have a completely different path. Not that you're not going to lose any weight for 2 years, but keep doing this again and again and again. Once you developed a good habit, make it like, I'm not going to do it the old way ever again. And I don't think people get to that point before they give up. That's what I notice, right? And it's like the habits.
That's the tricky bit. If we had a cause and effect that was very quick, and they could see that difference from what they've eaten, like if they took a cigarette and a month later, they've got lung cancer. But it is this time frame. And even with things like Alzheimer's, because I've written a book on Alzheimer's, which is our biggest killer as women, it's starting 20 to 30 years before that diagnosis. And it's understanding of this time frame. And that's the difficulty, because it's not so easy to see, well, I've eaten this and I feel like this, or it's caused that. It's such a long time frame between the cause and the effect that's harder to get across. But it's absolutely right, and it's what happens over time that's being caused by something, a couple of decades before.
So let's get to the next part. So now they're pregnant. And during pregnancy, there can be issues like blood pressure and sugar issues, gestational diabetes is, I would say, the pregnancy form of type 2 diabetes, though it's temporary, but, it's a good forerunner of how your health is going to be 20 years down the line. But coming off of pregnancy, when I look at patients, most patients get to me by the time they're in their late 40s or early 50s. But when you ask them the question that you ask, when was the last time you ever felt well? They'll say, after the birth of my son or my daughter. And I ask, so how old is your son or daughter? It's like 25. So they've gone for 25 years with this problem. So what is the problem that women experience? What does pregnancy do to women? And I have my own, from what I see from studies, but what have you noticed? And why do women take that much time to say, maybe I should get some help for this?
Yeah, and I think it is that depletion of nutrients, because obviously the baby takes first call on everything. It's the mother that gets left over with whatever's left over. But I think it's also that when that baby's born, then the mother is really not thinking about herself in the same way, that priority is the baby, the health of the baby, the toddler, the little boy or girl as they're growing up. And that, again, is her down that list of priorities, and everything else she's putting up with those symptoms because her focus is on the child, which is wonderful, but it puts herself on the back burner, and she's putting up with everything for so many years until the point that she comes to us, 25 years down the line, and is actually fed up with feeling like that, which is a shame that we are seeing her so late on, but it's where her focus is over that time in terms of the family and looking after everybody else.
Yeah. So I come from a culture where, especially for the first pregnancy, and especially if the woman was pregnant with a boy, they would really take care. I mean, she's like the princess, right?
Wow.
This massage, no work. You go to bed on time, you're given great nutrition. So when I came here, what I noticed is as women, pregnancy is like, oh, you want to get pregnant, but soon after pregnancy, you want to get back to work. Because our biological clock is at the same time as a career clock. And so there's so much of clash.
Yeah.
And I think it really disrupts us. That's number one. The other thing, what I've noticed is with each pregnancy, I think going into pregnancy, you're just one of those partying, happy-go-lucky person, now married, get pregnant. I think you get into the pregnancy without much nutrients to begin with. And then the pregnancy just depletes you, and there's a lot of inflammation, particularly of the thyroid. And I find it's like a subclinical hypothyroidism that they live with till they hit the next big insult, which is perimenopause. And now they're ready to, oh my God, I feel absolutely miserable. I need some help. That's what I find, and I agree with you. And when they have 3 and 4 kids, they're toast by the time they
And I suppose from the culture you've come from, it was an extended family.
Yeah.
So you had that, the woman would have had that help. We're in a nuclear situation where the woman is basically on her own. Maybe the partner's at work, but she's either staying at home or she's gone back to work and shouldering everything, the shopping, the working, the children, without any backup from other generations, which culturally, many traditional cultures would have that support that we don't have in our Western society.
Yeah, absolutely. So the price of privacy, right? And personal space. Yes. So after pregnancy, of course, then we get into the perimenopausal, which is another huge disruption. This is where I think the majority of the stresses, it's almost like the breaking point. Kids have gone, your career is coming to an end. And now it's like you can feel the aches in your bone. Your doctor just told you have osteoporosis. Your periods are erratic. You get more headaches. You feel like you're depressed. You're not sleeping anymore. You have anxiety. What does a woman do at this point? What can she do to actually not get there? But if she's there, how can she get out of that rut sooner than later?
We're going to go through a transition, which men don't. We're going through this another transition that's going to take us to the point where we've now got 30 to 50 years to live past the menopause. And it's for women to understand that if we can help them go through this transition smoothly and comfortably, that they've got this another third of their lives to live that well. And it just depends how motivated they are to make those changes. And I think that's really important, if they can understand that this is a transition and that they're going to move through it and out the other side. But how they come out the other side depends on what they do ahead of time. But it's a real shame for them not to get the benefit of these years past the menopause and to feel that with a lot of quality of life as well as quality. Because we talk about lifespan, but for me it's health span. That's what's really so important. The quality's got to be there as well as that quantity of years as well.
We're coming to the era of medicine where aging is not inevitable. I used to say disease is not inevitable, but now aging is not inevitable. There are so many things, of course, diet, exercise, putting in all that effort. If everybody did it, 100% of the folks did it, you and I would be out of jobs, right? People don't do it. They're looking for little short, easy routes because we're all not made the same. So what would you say is the one thing that most successful women do to regain their health?
I think it is really thinking about this as a life stage, and to get to that point is to say, okay, I've got to make some changes now if they haven't made them already, and think of it as a complete life change in terms of the exercise, the food, the stress levels, almost having an MOT. I think you have MOTs in the States as well. They're basically a checkup with somebody like you or I that actually then says, this is where you are, this is where you need to move to, and these are the changes you need to make to protect yourself against osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, the things that could come, these degenerative illnesses that could come over time but are preventable. And it's whether they're happy to take that step because it's something that's very strong for them and they want to make those changes to feel well in themselves.
Yeah. And I think the other big hurdle that most women have is this access to information, right? When I first started practice, I was the only source of information for them, right? There wasn't like, I'm going to call my doctor and whatever she says, I'm going to do. Now they come to me with this laundry list of things like, these are the things I saw on the internet. Do you think I have this? Do you think I have that? Mm-hmm. And so they get confused, as much as they're very well informed. How do you sort that out for them? Because I can start working with someone and they're doing a little more research and they want to know, I should be taking this supplement, should I be doing this, and I can see that they're punching holes into their journey without actually perfecting what things that I've already asked them to change. So in this, you can't blame them. We're all like that rabbit that's getting attracted to the next bling. How do you help people see through that and keep them on track? What do you tell them that helps them through that?
Yes, and you're right, because we've got so much information and they can look things up. It has changed over time, and it's really trying to say that actually that I know that if you follow this path, that I know I've seen women in the same situation of yourself, and these are the changes that you can experience. I would like you to follow this over the next few months and just, trust that knowledge. And then we can add on things after if you like to or if you need to. But to think about following something with a focus for a set period of time, and then see how you're feeling, the changes that you've experienced, and then we can fine-tune things as we go along if need be. But I think it's all about how do we help them to focus for a certain period of time and follow that one track that you and I know how different it can make them feel and their health and everything, because we've seen it in other women. And it's just, I think, them understanding that and almost trusting our information, our experience, to follow that over a period of time before we start adding in, or it ended up with a lot of confusion. It would cost them a lot of money. It's costing them confusion. It just doesn't help them by all the snippets they may be reading, and could this be helpful, could that be helpful. It's just trying to keep them on track for a set period of time, really.
Yep. Yeah, I actually tell them just for 90 days. This is the request I have. Don't look at anything, just listen to me, and then I'll walk you through that. After that, we'll go over everything else on your wish list. So let's say somebody is they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. I hear that so often. It's not even funny. It's like, why do you get to that point? But someone is really interested in making the transformation, but is scared. Change is scary for everybody. I almost feel like changing your lifestyle is asking somebody to change their religion. They have to believe in it. They have to believe that it is going to really be good for them, and this is a change that they actually need. Somewhere, they have to start somewhere. Is there a specific book that you recommend? I know you're an author of 13 books, and I'm fine with you giving one of your books. Also tell me if there's any other book that you felt was absolutely outstanding in helping a patient understand what they need to do.
Well, I would say the one that I've written that encompasses every woman's problem would be one called Natural Health Bible for Women. And I wrote that to cover every life stage, every problem we can encounter, but it also includes massage and aromatherapy, as well as all the nutritional and the medical tests that they should be doing as well. All my other books are more focused on a stage, like fertility, polycystic ovary syndrome, menopause, dementia, but it's the Natural Health Bible for Women, which is really covering every health stage. And when you think of all the other things we can suffer from, like cystitis, ovarian cysts, we've got a lot of things that we suffer from as women, and that was the aim, to write something that would be almost a reference book for every woman to be able to dip in and out as she needed it. So that was the purpose of writing, and it's also illustrated. So it was done beautifully by the publishers, I have to say. It's an exquisite way they put it all together with all the photographs.
That's nice. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes and a link to that book. Is there any other book that you recommend that women read? I think a lot of their journey begins with their mindset. Yes. And since you have psychology as your background, I'm sure you're the first person. I mean, I can't
think of anything off the top of my head at the moment, but there would have been some over the years, and even some of the older ones.
Yeah.
I think the one that really hit me, but it's a long time gone now, and I don't even know if it's still in print, but it was Yudkin's book, Sweet, White and Deadly, and that was his sugar book that really, for me, set me off thinking about this food group that we were all eating, and in vast quantities. And it was he got a lot of antagonism about that book from his own peer group and everything, but to come out with something like that, which now is widely recognized, was, I think it must have been in the 60s or 70s, but yes, something very brave to do something like that at that time.
Sweet, White and Deadly. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And the other part that I wanted to ask you is, so this is another, I'm sure you see it too, because you do webinars like I do. I see people who show up on my webinars. They've been following me for 4 or 5 years. They've been educating themselves, but they never take the first step. And whenever there's a group question, they talk about how sick they are and how no one can help them. What is that big barrier that they seem to be facing?
Yeah, so the question is then, are they willing to make a change? And also they've got to let go of something as well. So like we talked about habits and things like that, and the beliefs that people have, in some way they're moving towards something else, but they've got to let go of something that they may have believed over time, and that's got to be released as well in order for them to move forward. But also part of it psychologically is whether they want to stay in that situation in terms of the victim side of it. It's whether that illness is who they are, and the symptoms and the sympathy and the support. I don't mean it unkindly, but I have seen that the sympathy in the family and maybe in some way it suits them to stay where they are rather than to move out of it. They're being looked after. They don't have to go shopping because somebody's bringing it for them. They're cooking for them. So it just depends on what's going on in that family dynamics as well, as to whether they can take that step. Can they let go? Can they move forward? And is it something that they don't have to stay as that victim and put up with those symptoms that they've had for years? It's a bit of a shift that they're going to have to make physically and mentally to do that.
I see that they are not aware of it. They truly believe that they are sick, but a lot of times, in fact, I tell patients ask me, if I work with you, can you ensure that I will get better? And it's like, if I say you will get better, you should run from whatever I am doing. Obviously, that's not how it works. There's a small percentage, I would say 2 to 3%. Even if I know what to do for them, I know I can't help them because I see that pattern.
Yeah.
Where their disease becomes their identity.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that has defined their journey of life. I've had rheumatoid arthritis all my life, and I've gotten crippled over the years, and no one can do anything about it. Look at my joints, right? That's it's a very unfortunate.
Even medically, they might have been told that actually, well, you're depressed and you're going to be like this for the rest of their life. And
that is so true.
They've taken that as a truth, that is what's going to happen, no matter what anybody else has said, because the doctor has said that's the way they're going to be. And we know we can't shift that unless they're happy to shift it.
And, that is probably the most powerful thing that I've ever seen. And if there are any physicians listening to this, I really want that to sink in. Our words are so powerful to a human being who truly believes the doctor knows everything.
Yeah.
And when we tell a patient, I've said this because I was taught this, once you're a diabetic, you're always a diabetic. You have to be on metformin for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter what happens, it's going to come back. And I've also been told statements like, you can postpone disease, but you cannot prevent it. And all of that is untrue. And we know that as we work in the wellness, yes, you may be at a risk for certain diseases, but you have a whole bunch of things that you can change in order not to actually have that risk manifest itself. So that's very important. And before I come to the close of this, I want to talk about another very growing problem, which I haven't seen as much coming from where I did. I mean, it's been over 26 years since I've left India, but osteoporosis, I'm seeing it in younger and younger women, and not even necessarily they're menopausal. Like, I've had a patient who's had their bone density go down by 50% with menopause. So that was a really, like you say, estrogen, but we say estrogen dependent bone density. In general, I'm seeing younger and younger women having a decrease, like osteopenia beginning, because that's a huge structural change that's happening. And I've seen you talk about it. What is your take on that? Why is that happening?
I think it's a couple of things. I think vitamin D is crucial, and that obviously is so important in terms of absorption of calcium. We've got rickets back in the UK that we thought we'd got rid of 40 years ago.
No way.
Yes, because of the message to stay out the sun. We have like you said, we go from one extreme to another. We have to get this balance and homeostasis. So the message has been, and I understand it in terms of skin cancer, but we've gone so far the other way that we've got a raging vitamin D deficiency in the UK. So that's going to have this huge impact on bone density. And of course, for us as women, we reach our peak bone mass around the age of 25 to 30. So we're trying to get on as much as possible. And like we talked about, women who've lost their cycle because they've gone down the clean eating route, they're not going to have the female hormones. And the other one that's striking from the research are all the colas and the fizzy drinks, because they contain phosphoric acid as a gives it its tangy taste, it is actually increasing the risk of fractures even in girls as young as 8 to 16 years old, because of how much of these colas are being drunk. And then it means then that women are not, those young girls are not even reaching their peak bone density at the time that they're supposed to. So they're already lower before they even hit the menopause. And of course, for us, and not a lot of girls are walking to school, the physical activity's gone down because everybody's in front of a computer. So there's a whole generation shift around physical activity, smoking for young girls, alcohol going in, the cola and the processed foods going up, lack of vitamin D. It's almost like could be an osteoporosis epidemic in a few years' time, because it's all of these things hitting together is having this huge impact on women's bone health and the risk of fractures. They think it's now 1 in 2 women will get osteoporosis past the age of 50.
Wow.
Not mine, but will.
Yeah. So I've also noticed the other extreme where they have physical activity, but they're doing too much of it. They're running like 9-10 miles a day. And I just find that elution of that calcium off the bone to neutralize all the lactic acid that they're producing with muscle activity also contributes. So you can go too much on either extremes to find, again, a medium, a moderation in all of this.
And that amount of exercise, they'll lose that body fat percentage, so the menstrual cycle will stop.
Yeah.
So then they've lost that estrogen benefit. So it is that, how do we go down the middle line of this balance that we're always after for any health condition? It's how do we get that moderation and for somebody to stay within that middle instead of going one extreme or the other.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, is there something that you wish I had asked you but I did not?
No, I don't think so, actually. It's been really comprehensive and wonderful to see the alignment of our viewpoints, you know, in terms of looking after the women that we see, the same sort of problems coming up, and then how do we motivate these women to make these changes? Because it's very different. If we were, say, an osteopath or a chiropractor, we're doing something to people. Yeah. We're sitting across a desk or remotely, if we're on Zoom, giving advice. And it's how does that click for somebody, and the words we use that they then go away and say, I can do this. And I can see that you've seen the same experiences that I have over the time I've been in this field as well. And it's how do we motivate them to make that change, because it's just words that we're giving them, and those words, like you said, could be powerful either way. And negatively in this, unfortunately, the medical world of a self-fulfilling prophecy, well, you've got this condition and you've got to live with it for the rest of your life. And how do we say, well, actually, no, you don't. And, you know, we can help you. And that is so powerful. And I think for me, the one that's made the difference over time is for women who have been told, well, you're never going to get pregnant, or they've had miscarriages, and 10 years down the line, enable them to help to create a new life. You know, that is something really powerful, because you're either pregnant or you're not. You can't be a little bit pregnant like we you know, it's such a definite result. And that for me has been, I suppose, so fulfilling over the time to make that, help that woman and that couple have this new life and that change for them as a family unit.
Yeah. I think that's another huge problem that's coming up, where fertility issues are, I don't know what the incidence is now. Is it like 1 in how many women? But it's increasing. You're seeing maybe because they're planning their pregnancy later on in life and they've been on oral contraceptive pills for decades before they make that decision. So there are a lot of women issues that are evolving, but the way I tell women to look at it is you got to be a little selfish to be selfless. Because if you take good care of yourself, you will not be a burden to your family as you get older. Because the fact of the matter is most of us are going to be living into our 90s, if not into our hundreds. And how much of, because I see that with a lot of my patients who are in their 50s and 60s, their parents are in the 80s, 90s in nursing homes. You're almost tethered to that city, constantly worrying about, especially with COVID, where you couldn't even go and visit them because they are so frail and cannot take care of themselves. They have no memory. They can't walk. They fall. They go to the hospital. There's so much. It's almost like you're taking payback for all those years of work that you put into their lives, your kids' lives, that you're taking everything back with interest. So I think begin by taking care of yourself so that you are not a burden, but actually an asset, just like what we see in the blue zone areas where the Mediterranean or Rosetta, all of those studies show that people who had purpose in life into their later years and were the center of the family, a part of the decision making, where the family still had that connection, those were the folks who actually had a very robust and fruitful life right till the end, rather than spending 2 decades of their life in nursing homes.
Yeah.
So,
and I also say to them that actually you've got to look after yourself in order to be able to look after all the people that you're looking after, because they're juggling so many balls, and if they collapse, everything collapses down. And it is thinking, and I thought that terminology, to be selfish, to be selfless, that is really, quite a good phrase. And it is about how to help them to understand that if they don't look after themselves, they can't look after their children and their elderly and everybody else that they're taking care of. They can't.
Yep. Absolutely. I totally agree. I could sit down and talk with you for another couple of hours, but I don't think people will be able to listen to us. So I think overall, it's really make that decision to take care of yourself. Be a little selfish so you can be selfless. And, begin by addressing all those fluctuations of blood sugars. I think that's where it all begins. And that's what we're sold to. I mean, if you buy a pre-made food, if you look at the ingredient, one of the first ingredients is sugar and water.
Yeah,
so
I know. Frightening, really. We've got to get people to read the labels, I think.
Absolutely. I think that can be a whole podcast by itself. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm looking forward to it. I probably will buy a couple of your books and start reading them, because I think women need a solid science-based approach to their health, rather than being just sold supplements and or diets, fad diets that work temporarily, but then they're back on that roller coaster ride of chronic disease, and it can be completely prevented or even avoided.
Yeah. But anybody's welcome to get in touch. They can contact me on MarilynGlenville.com if they want to. Yeah. Anything.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful website, lots of information. So I'll post that link also below the show notes. And once again, thank you so much, Marilyn.
Oh, Nick, it's lovely to talk to you. And anytime, it's been a delight. So I'm wonderful that we've got this work on different places in the universe, and for us to support women through all those stages in their life cycle.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.